Out, man. Speaker Sarah, check this out. Yo, Greg,
Yo, can you hear me?
what are you doing? Yeah. Hey, Dirty, I'm gonna check with you later, G.
All right, my guy.
All right,
Peace out.
you can hang out in the room if you want, or you can just whatever. But I'm gonna pull
For
you
sure.
out.
I'll be
All right.
around. I'll keep
All
a
right.
camera.
All right, bet. Man,
What up,
how you
Jesse?
sleeping?
Oh, horribly.
Man, you look like a dude that's
Oh,
running
no.
a historic campaign. Bro, a historic campaign. You're in the middle of history. You're in the middle of the same world where Borat is fighting Rudy Giuliani and Ice Cube and Donald Trump are in the same tweets.
And
You're
50 Cent.
man, you're fighting tear gas Ted, man.
It's amazing. I mean, we have the most donors ever in the city of Portland history. And it's amazing with the new open and accountable elections. You can like see a map of where people's donors are, and we're just spread throughout the city, mostly in Southeast and St. John's, etc. And then you see Ted Wheeler's, and it's just big circles rather than a whole bunch of little ones all in Southwest or other cities. So if he were to win, he would have the least amount of donors ever for a mayor to win a race.
Who the hell is giving that guy money besides himself?
Just rich people.
His wife.
Because of the new laws, they can't really give it directly to him. I mean, he has tapped all of his rich friends for the $500 limit, but the thing is, he doesn't even have too many of them left, at least not enough to combat what Sarah has. But what he does have, unfortunately, is a lot. He has a super PAC now. So that's funded with $150,000 from the realtors, tens of thousands of dollars from the Portland Business Alliance, Nike, Portland General Electric. So just like really big businesses are out to
He
get him.
must have to promise those guys to get that money, when he goes out there with his hat in his hand. Think of the promises and the concessions he's willing to make to get his hands on that money.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, a lot of it is what they know he's not going to do. Like, Sarah is even willing to look at progressive taxation, which is like just a huge no-no for them. But it's also that they're used to being able to have someone in their pocket. So even if they did not like Ted, which I think a lot of them would agree that he's been a failure on the issues that they care about, like they care about. They don't want there to be a lot of homelessness, right? I wouldn't say they care about the houseless, but they do care about the issue of homelessness. And he's been a failure on that, but it's more than just that he's been a failure, but that when he has a problem, he calls them. When he has to run again, he calls them. So any group of people, it's only human nature that if you've held this power of choosing who gets to be an elected official, choosing or being the person who's called when an issue comes up, you're not going to want to give away that power, even if you believe that the person who's calling is incompetent or ineffective.
That's the same reason that people still support Donald Trump, because he's like the last life preserver of comfortable whiteness that allows people to be in positions that they're not really qualified for, and they would be replaced by a more qualified person from a marginalized demographic. But Trump keeps them there, right? It's like racial sensitivity training and things like that, diversity training. Those are disappearing, and people are holding on to that value, even though it forces them to co-sign for some nasty shit.
Yeah, and similarly, the people, there's a lot of people we know who vote for Trump and love Trump, right? But that's a very small percentage of the people who actually vote for Trump. A lot of the people who vote for Trump are never going to tell you they voted for Trump, they don't have a Trump bumper sticker, right? They're not yelling MAGA. And similarly with Ted Wheeler, we don't have a lot of extremely vocal Ted Wheeler supporters, right? Like you're not going to see a lot of people posting their ballots with a filled in Ted Wheeler circle, like, hey, yeah, like I'm so proud of this, right? You don't see Ted Wheeler lawn signs, bumper stickers, etc. Because the support that he has, they're not proud to be his supporters. But that's not to say that this election isn't going to be close. I think it's going to be incredibly close.
You know, a lot of people don't think that Ted Wheeler and Donald Trump are very similar because Ted changed his political affiliation to a Democrat, right? And because Ted like wears glasses and speaks a little more quietly than Donald Trump does, but really they're not much different. And they both really touch the same white base. But the part that bothers me the most about Ted is knowing that he is from Wheeler, Oregon. And everybody who's studied Oregon history knows that all of those coastal towns are influenced by the KKK directly. They're funded by the KKK. They're built by the KKK. The churches, the granges, the stores, the stables. They used to take pictures all over Oregon. And to think that somehow Wheeler, Oregon was able to distance itself from that kind of influence, and yet it's never been talked about by Ted. Ted's never spoken about it. Ted's never publicly disavowed whatever ties. How would we think while it touched Seaside, while it touched Lincoln City, while it touched Newport, while it touched Otis, that somehow that money didn't touch Ted Wheeler? And he's not the generational heir of that fortune, that entrenched up. We just lost Greg. No, there he's back. Man.
Do not disturb.
No, there you go. You're good.
Okay.
But somebody messaged you probably.
Yeah, somebody called me.
Oh man, that happens. That happens to Angela all the time when she's a guest. Okay, hey, let's I don't want to tap dance around this because I was just trying to Google it. Tell me, Greg.
Yeah.
It's the double question. I'm gonna ask them both, and then we're gonna take each one separately. One, why did Sarah wear that dress? And two, was there a decision that Sarah was going to specifically identify her campaign as anti-fascist? Or is that just the natural opposition of Ted's fascism? Is that like the default reflection to Ted? Or, oh, there he's back. Hold on. There he is.
I'm seeing a little, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay. So
first the dress.
Okay, yeah. So it was a skirt that was really popular at Portland Saturday Market. It's pop art. It's satire of a lot of historical figures, making them look silly. And there's a lot of other people who are not communist leaders on that skirt. I forget who, but I think like Bob Dylan or something is on the skirt. And like they focus on, like, they call it a Mao skirt when Mao is one of the boxes. But it's pop art, it's satire. And what we say is, you know, when Sarah's mayor, she's going to fund the arts and fund education to a level where all Portlanders will be able to recognize satire and pop art when they see it. It's not an endorsement, obviously, and we don't plan on, you know, enacting the cultural people's revolution or something when she takes office. But
has it been retired?
Yeah, I mean, I doubt she'd wear it again. She wore it to Reverend Billy's, if you know who that is. Reverend Billy was in town, and he does this like spectacle thing where you're supposed to wear whatever the most absurd thing that you have or something. And so she wore it thinking it was absurd. I'm sure had I been her campaign director in 2016, like maybe we would have had more discussion about it. But it's really unfortunate because
it's that old of a photo.
Oh, it's from 2016. Yeah, it's not from.
It never ever has
cycle.
a date on it. It never has a date on it.
It's
I just get shared all over the place in just like, oh my gosh, that's all you got.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so unfortunate because Ted Wheeler is literally tear gassing our neighbors, and we're going to talk about Sarah's tweets and skirts. It's just like Ted Wheeler wants us to focus, and it's just like it couldn't be more like classic misogyny, like that we're gonna, not we, you and I, but we as in a city or a people are going to ignore Ted Wheeler's failures and instead talk about Sarah in her own skirt or that she cussed on Twitter or something like that. Like, this is not the 1950s.
Okay, so check this out. I don't want you to think that this is that kind of show.
No, of course not. I'm not saying you. I'm glad you have me a chance to answer it because it's so many people like other places that there's no platform to really talk about it. like it's all over Reddit, etc. And it's placed there, like you said, with no date, no context, no response, no anything. So I love the opportunity to respond to it, but our response is really like that we hope that anybody who thinks that that would influence their vote instead looks at policy. And if you're worried about the judgment decisions of our elected officials, Ted Wheeler has demonstrated inability to make good judgment decisions as mayor. And if you really don't like the things that communist dictators did, like as most people don't, Ted Wheeler has done far more closer things like gassing his own people to that than Sarah Iannarone ever has. So,
Okay, so I'm gonna skip over that, and I'm gonna go to some quality journalism, which you don't get a lot of these days.
Let's do the Antifa one, because I think that's an important point too.
Okay.
Yeah, she so we did not make a conscious decision that we were gonna like run an anti-fascist campaign, although we do believe that it should be the default, right? Like, and obviously there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation of Antifa versus anti-fascism, and I'm not so naive to be like to come on to anybody's show and be like, we're just gonna all act like anti-fascism and Antifa are synonymous or something. I know that, you know, the way that it is used in the popular lexicon is different than just being anti-fascist, but at the core of like Antifa, it's short form for anti-fascism, and that should be the default position for everybody. And she's never wavered upon that. And then Ted Wheeler has leaned into right-wing dog whistles to then associate her with violence and criminality, when in fact it's the opposite that we're associated with by claiming to be anti-fascist. So, you know, everybody should be anti-fascist. In a recent debate, when Sarah was asked about this, and then Ted responded, he said, "Of course I'm anti-fascist, but there's no fascists in Oregon." And he's never met a fascist, and that nobody calls themselves a fascist. I mean, very rarely do people call themselves a racist either. And when you have this sort of mindset that fascism doesn't exist in Oregon, or that the rise of it is incapable in Oregon, when he was mayor, when Jeremy Christian murdered 2 people on a MAX train, it's just dangerous. And so we want to ensure that there's equal enforcement of the law. And what we've seen so far is when white nationalists come to town, they get bus escorts, police escorts. Police beat and gas their political opponents so that they have safe haven in Portland, and that's just unacceptable. And so when she says she's anti-fascist, it means she's anti the fascists that invade, the real outside agitators that invade our city, run around, commit crimes, beat vulnerable people, and terrorize our community. And it's important that we have a mayor that is heading our city with that vision, rather than someone who doesn't even acknowledge the fact that we do have a problem with the rise of white nationalism in our city.
Great answer. So in 2016, the knock on Sarah was completely different. And I think that that entire knock has kind of been forgotten, except for maybe people in the developmental circles, right? And that is that Sarah is beholden to the same outside interests that want to buy up all our properties for investments, and that her partnership with Charlie Hales' wife is still problematic. And, you know, it's only been 4 years and none of that is dissolved. And, you know, a lot of us in 2016 really viewed Sarah as a flawed candidate because of her, her ties to Charlie Hales, and 2, of her ambitions to make Portland so much bigger and global and a leader in all these things. And really, it felt like Portland would be sold out to the highest bidders, and it would really be the nail in the coffin of every last part of Portland, right? And I don't want to hear that Sarah was a small business owner as the answer. To that
No,
question.
no. I think this is important too, and I think I'll go with the Hills thing and then go with development. So, um, I think that there was also sort of misinformation about the closeness that she had to Charlie Hills and Nancy Hills. So Nancy Hills was her boss, right? Like, and we all have bosses. That doesn't necessarily mean that my boss's spouse is then the one putting me up to anything that I do, right? Or that, and you know, Sarah is a very strong-willed person. And that might be one of the reasons why Nancy Hills and Sarah are not, you know, there's been no conversations between the two during this election cycle. And so nobody's telling Sarah what to do. I wish I could tell Sarah what to do more than I can, and I'm the campaign director. Like, Sarah is incredibly strong-willed, and I think that she
I
obviously
don't mean,
had,
I don't mean, I don't mean, I don't mean that Nancy Hales is secretly puppeting
yeah.
Sarah's
Well, there
campaign.
are people that
I
have
would
thought
never
that in
insult.
2016.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's
Yeah, yeah,
fair. I would never,
yeah,
you know, I know Sarah personally,
yeah.
inside the campaign and outside the campaign. She's been nice enough to invite me to lunch a couple times in the past, giving me some really good advice, and I kind of consider Sarah a mentor, really. Um,
She says every time that we're on the campaign, when we were on the campaign trail, we had a big campaign trail with lots of people. She said, "Could we just have Jesse Spomberg in this race? Because that was so much more fun. I want to hang out with Jesse." And she said you were her favorite candidate to be around in 2016. So the development side of things I think is important because housing policy is incredibly complicated, and I've learned so much from Sarah about this. But obviously, I will say one. People grow and evolve. You've seen me grow and evolve in 4 years, right? Like,
I've
I
seen
talk
a
way
whole bunch of
differently
that in
than,
Sarah.
yeah, yeah. And so I do think she's grown and evolved, and she also spent that past 4 years really embedded in community and a lot of communities that you're in as well, just working with houseless folks and stuff. And so I think that that perspective is important, especially when compared against her opponent. But at the root of this
She
issue
really has.
is,
She really
yeah.
has become a leader in the community, win or lose. You know, that's always one of my biggest criticisms of people that run for office. It's like you
Hmm.
made promises to this community, but it was only contingent on you winning an office.
Yeah.
The community still needs you, right? And a lot of people disappear. And I really want to admire and like sincerely
Hmm.
say that I see that, and I see you, Sarah, whenever you see this interview.
And I'm
Uh,
excited. I'm excited for whatever is on the other side of this. I expect to win, but if she lost, she has built a tremendous platform now, and the opportunities for her to affect change in our community will still be endless. Obviously, we expect and want her to be mayor. But on the development side, so there's a lot of different ideas on how we should address our affordable housing crisis, and I say this separately than our homelessness crisis, right? They're obviously tied together, but they're not just one big thing, right? Like, solving affordable housing doesn't automatically solve homelessness. Solving unwanted camping or people being in the streets doesn't automatically solve affordable housing, right? So when I have this conversation, I'm talking specifically about affordable housing, which impacts people like you and me that are not rich, right? But are, and you know, anybody can be a paycheck or two away from homelessness, but are not homeless, right? So
right.
affordable housing impacts our entire community in the way that, and the thing is, I think in 2016, a lot of Portland still hadn't fully accepted that we are going to grow. We're going to have to grow. Like, people are going to come here. And I think in 2016, there was still a little bit of like, stop coming here. Like, this is old Portland and stuff like that. And we do have to think about how we preserve what makes Portland good, without, and what makes Portland different than the rest of the country, what will prevent us from becoming San Francisco, right? Which was also a weird town at some point, and then now is something that is unrecognizable to many, especially those who grew up there. And so I understand the worry, but the fact of the matter is, and this is where we get really into policy and where some people would disagree, is one way that we have to solve our affordable housing crisis is to build. And to build, and then so then you have two different tracks of how we build. And some people would say, well, the public sector should build everything, and that is ideal. Although projects have not historically worked. But if we did it with anti-displacement measures and had enough money or something, like then the public building would be great. But there simply just is not the money to do that at the city level. It can't happen right now, and the crisis is now. So what we need is public-private partnerships to build, and then we need to push those private partners to ensure that each time that we're building, that there are strong anti-displacement measures to make sure we're not pricing people out of their communities, but also to ensure that we're maintaining the culture of neighborhoods, in that when we are building climate smart cities that have compact walkable neighborhoods, and you can get to a grocery store in your neighborhood by walking there, right? Like, and
That's
that,
what